I never thought my sister's dream of having a baby would lead to the biggest betrayal of our lives. But that's exactly what happened when I tried to help make her wish come true. My name is June, and family means everything to me. After losing our parents in a car accident 5 years ago, my sister Caitlin became my whole world. So when she confided in me about her struggles with infertility over coffee one morning, I knew I had to help. The doctors say IVF is our best shot, Caitlin said, stirring her latte absently. But the cost? She trailed off, blinking back tears. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Let me help. I've been saving up, and this is what family's for. Her eyes widened. June, no, that's too much. Thomas and I need to do this on our own. Katie, please, you're my little sister. Let me do this for you. She pulled her hand away, her jaw set stubbornly. Money can't guarantee happiness, June. You can't fix everything by throwing money at it. Her words stung more than they should have. I'm not trying to fix anything. I just want to help. Well, don't. She stood up abruptly, gathering her purse. This is between me and Thomas. Stay out of it. I watched her storm out of the cafe, fighting back my own tears. That was 2 weeks ago. Then yesterday, Thomas showed up at my office unannounced. June, I need to talk to you, he said, flashing that charming smile that had won my sister over 3 years ago. About the IVF, I gestured for him to sit. Katie made it clear she doesn't want my help. That's just her pride talking. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Look, she's been researching clinics. She wants this so badly, but she's too stubborn to accept help. Thomas, I can't go behind her back. It wouldn't be like that. We'd tell her after everything's arranged. Make it a surprise. His eyes lit up. Imagine her face when she realizes her dream can come true. I shifted uncomfortably in my chair. I don't know. June, you're always saying family comes first. This could give Katie everything she wants. A baby, a family of her own. He pulled out some paperwork. I've already found the perfect clinic. They have amazing success rates. I studied the brochures, my resolve weakening. She'll be angry. At first, maybe, but when she's holding her baby, she'll thank you. He smiled again. This is your chance to be the big sister you've always wanted to be. The check felt heavy in my hand as I wrote it out. $50,000, my entire savings, meant for a down payment on a house. But family comes first, right? I'll transfer it to the clinic first thing tomorrow, Thomas said, carefully folding the check into his wallet. Katie will be so happy once she understands. As he left, a nagging doubt gnawed at my stomach. Something felt off, but I pushed the feeling aside. This was for Caitlin, for her dream of becoming a mother. That evening, I called my cousin Michaela. You did what? She exclaimed when I told her. June, that doesn't sound right. Why wouldn't Thomas want to tell Katie now? He says she'd refuse if she knew. Exactly, because it's her body, her choice. This feels sketchy. I sank onto my couch, the doubt growing stronger. But he showed me all the clinic information. Did you verify any of it? Call the clinic yourself. I hadn't. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Promise me you'll call them tomorrow, Michaela insisted. Just to be sure everything's legitimate. I will, I promised. But my hands were already shaking as I pulled up my banking app. The check had already been cashed. How was that possible? Banks weren't even open this late. My phone buzzed with a text from Caitlin. Can you come over? Something's wrong. Thomas isn't answering his phone. As I grabbed my keys, my heart pounding, I realized I might have made a terrible mistake. One that could cost me not just my savings, but something far more precious. My sister's trust. Family means everything to me. But what happens when trying to help your family leads to their destruction instead? I broke every speed limit getting to Caitlin's house. The porch light was on, but the rest of the house was dark. When she opened the door, her face was streaked with mascara, and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. He's gone, she choked out, collapsing into my arms. Thomas cleaned out our accounts and left. I guided her to the couch, my own hands trembling now. What do you mean, cleaned out? Everything. She grabbed her phone, pulling up her banking app. Our savings, checking, even my personal account. All of it June. Over $70,000. My stomach lurched. 70,000 plus my 50,000. The magnitude of what Thomas had done hit me like a tidal wave. When did you notice? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. An hour ago. I tried to order takeout, and my card was declined. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve. I thought it was a mistake, but then I checked online and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I found emails. He's been seeing someone else. For months. I pulled her closer, my guilt threatening to choke me. Katie, there's something I need to tell you. What? Thomas came to see me yesterday. He asked for money for your IVF treatment. He said it was going to be a surprise for you. She stiffened in my arms. What? I gave him $50,000. Caitlin jerked away from me as if I'd burned her. You what? He showed me brochures from the clinic. He seemed so sincere about wanting to help you. After I specifically told you I didn't want your money. Her voice rose with each word. You went behind my back? I'm so sorry. You thought you knew better than me. Again. She stood up, pacing the room. God, June, when will you learn to stop interfering in my life? My phone buzzed. A text from Michaela. Did you check on that clinic? Caitlin noticed my expression change. What is it? Michaela warned me something felt off. She told me to verify the clinic information. Well? Caitlin demanded. Did you? I shook my head, shame burning my cheeks. The check was cashed before I could. Unbelievable. She laughed bitterly. So not only did my husband steal from me and cheat on me, but my own sister helped him do it. That's not fair. Fair? She whirled on me. You want to talk about fair? I told you no. I told you this was between me and Thomas. But you couldn't help yourself, could you? You always have to be the hero, the fixer, the perfect big sister. Her words cut deep, but I deserved them. You're right. I should have respected your wishes. But right now, we need to focus on finding Thomas. We. She arched an eyebrow. There is no we, June. You've done enough. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. Local businessman, Thomas Ross, spotted boarding flight to Cancun with unidentified woman. I wordlessly showed Caitlin the screen. She sank back onto the couch, all fight draining from her face. I trusted him, she whispered. I loved him. I know. I sat beside her, careful to maintain distance. But we can't let him get away with this, not just for us, but for anyone else he might try to scam. She was quiet for a long moment. That woman he's with, what if she's just another victim? What if he's planning to do the same thing to her? Then we stop him. I pulled up Michaela's number. Our cousin knows a private investigator, someone who specializes in cases like this. Cases of stupid women trusting lying men. Cases of fraud and theft. I hesitated before adding, will you let me help? Really help this time, not just throw money at the problem. Caitlin wiped her eyes again, straightening her shoulders. On one condition. Anything. No more secrets. No more going behind my back. We do this together, or not at all. I nodded, relief flooding through me. Together. As I dialed Michaela's number, Caitlin's hand found mine, and squeezed. We had a long way to go to rebuild our trust. But at least it was a start. Thomas had underestimated one crucial thing when he decided to con us both. Nothing is stronger than sisters united in revenge. Michaela arrived at Caitlin's house within 30 minutes, armed with her laptop and a determined expression. She'd always been the practical one in our family, the problem solver who kept a cool head in crisis. First things first, she said, setting up her computer on the kitchen table. We need to document everything. Bank statements, emails, text messages, anything that shows Thomas's deception. Caitlin pulled out her phone. I saved screenshots of the emails I found. They're pretty explicit, her voice cracked. You don't have to read them again, I assured her. Just forward them to Michaela. Actually, you should read them. Michaela countered gently. There might be clues about where he's going or who he's with. As Caitlin scrolled through the emails, her face hardened. Wait, this one's different. She turned the phone so we could see. He mentioned something about an investment opportunity in Mexico, said he needed to secure funding quickly. Michaela's fingers flew across her keyboard. That tracks with what I found. I have a friend at the bank, don't ask, who says Thomas made several large wire transfers to an account in Cancun over the past month. Before he even asked me for money, I realized this wasn't spontaneous. He planned it. There's more, Michaela said. The woman he's with, her name is Rachel. She's posted several photos with Thomas on Instagram over the last few months, but they're tagged with a different name for him. What? Caitlin leaned over Michaela's shoulder. James Turner, that's not, oh God. She pressed a hand to her mouth. I think I'm going to be sick. I guided her to the bathroom, holding her hair back as she retched. When she finished, she looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. How could I be so stupid? Hey, he fooled me too, I reminded her. And I'm supposed to be the careful one. A knock at the front door made us both jump. Michaela's voice called out, It's just Seth, the PI I told you about. Seth turned out to be a tall, serious-looking man with kind eyes. He listened intently as we explained the situation, taking notes on a small pad. Classic romance scammer pattern, he said when we finished. But he made some mistakes, using the same photos with different names, sloppy, and those wire transfers leave a clear trail. Can you find him? Caitlin asked. Already have. Seth showed us his tablet. Your husband checked into the Grand Plaza Hotel in Cancun 3 hours ago. Under the name James Turner, naturally. What do we do now? I asked. Now, Seth said, we build a case. Mexican authorities take fraud seriously, especially when it involves international wire transfers. But we need to move fast. Michaela raised her hand like we were back in school. I have an idea. My friend Marin, she's a lawyer who specializes in fraud cases. She could help us navigate the legal aspects. Call her, Caitlin said firmly. Then she turned to me. June, I need to ask you something. Anything. Did you mean what you said about doing this together? Of course. Then I need you to promise me something. When we find Thomas, and we will find him, I get to confront him first. Not you trying to protect me, not Michaela with her connections, not Seth with his evidence. Me. I hesitated, my protective instincts warring with respect for her wishes. She's right, Seth interjected. The strongest cases are built on direct testimony from primary victims, and from what I've seen, your sister is stronger than anyone gives her credit for. Caitlin's chin lifted at his words. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw a glimpse of the fierce, independent woman who'd always pushed back against my overprotectiveness. Okay, I agreed. But we do this smart. No rushing off to Cancun, half-cocked. Agreed. Caitlin managed a small smile. Besides, I want him to see me coming. I want him to know exactly who brought him down. Michaela's phone buzzed. Marin can see us tomorrow morning at 9. She says to bring every scrap of evidence we have. As we gathered around the table, sorting through documents and building our case, I watched my sister transform. With each email she analyzed, each bank statement she reviewed, her shoulders straightened a little more. The betrayed wife became a warrior, channeling her pain into purpose. You know what the worst part is? She said suddenly. He didn't just steal our money. He stole my dream of having a family. I reached for her hand. No, he didn't. That dream is still yours. And when this is over, we'll find a way to make it happen. The right way this time. She squeezed my hand back, and I knew we'd turned a corner. Thomas thought he could break us, but he'd only made us stronger. Tomorrow we'd start bringing him to justice. Tonight, we were rebuilding something he could never steal. Our bond as sisters. Marin's office smelled like coffee and determination. She listened intently as we laid out our evidence on her polished mahogany desk, occasionally nodding or making notes. This is actually better than most cases I see, she said, examining Thomas's bank transfers. He left a clear paper trail. Overconfident criminals usually do. But can we get the money back? Caitlin asked, perched on the edge of her chair. That's where it gets complicated. Marin leaned forward. Seth, what have you found about his current activities? Seth pulled up several photos on his tablet. He's definitely following a pattern. Rachel isn't his only other target. I've identified 3 more women in the Cancun area he's been communicating with using different aliases. Show me, Caitlin demanded. The photos revealed Thomas, or James, or whatever he was calling himself, dining with different women at upscale restaurants. The latest photos are from last night, Seth continued. He's meeting with a woman named Maria tonight at the hotel's rooftop bar. She's a local business owner, wealthy. His next mark, I said, feeling sick. Marin tapped her pen against her desk. This changes things. We're not just dealing with theft anymore. This is an ongoing criminal enterprise. What does that mean for us? I asked. It means we can involve international authorities. Wire fraud across borders is serious business. She picked up her phone. I have contacts in the Mexican Federal Police. If we can prove he's actively scamming multiple victims, we need to warn Maria, Caitlin interrupted. We can't let him do this to anyone else. Seth nodded. I can get a message to her, but we need to be careful not to spook Thomas. If he realizes we're on to him, he'll run, Michaela finished, and probably take what's left of the money with him. Exactly. Marin started typing on her computer. I'm drafting emergency injunctions to freeze his known accounts, but we need to move fast. My phone buzzed with a notification. Oh my God. What is it? Caitlin asked. I showed her the screen. A dating app notification. There was Thomas's profile, under yet another name, right in our home city. He's been running this scam here too, I realized. All those business trips he took. Send me that, Seth said sharply. Dating app records can be subpoenaed. If we can prove he was operating the scam before leaving the country, it strengthens our case for international cooperation. Marin finished. June, Caitlin, I need you both to make official statements. Every detail you can remember about his behavior, his requests for money, everything. For the next 2 hours, we relived every moment of Thomas's deception. Each lie, each manipulation, each false promise. Caitlin's hands shook as she described finding the emails, but her voice stayed strong. Wait, Michaela said suddenly, looking up from her laptop. I think I found something. Rachel's posted a new photo. She's tagged her location at a wedding chapel. We all crowded around her screen. There was Thomas, in a suit, standing next to Rachel, outside a gaudy Cancun chapel. He's going to marry her, Caitlin whispered. Just like he married me. It's the same scam. Not this time, Marin said firmly. She picked up her phone again. This is attempted bigamy. That's another criminal charge we can add to the list. Seth's tablet pinged. Maria confirmed she'll meet us instead of Thomas tonight. She's bringing financial records of her own. Apparently, he already convinced her to transfer some funds to a joint business venture. How much? I asked. $100,000. Caitlin stood up abruptly. Book me on the next flight to Cancun. Katie, I started. No, June. You promised I could confront him. Well, I want to do it before he ruins another woman's life. She turned to Marin. What do you need from me to make this happen legally? Marin smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her. I thought you might say that. I've already prepared the paperwork. Seth can accompany you as a licensed investigator, and I've arranged for local law enforcement to be standing by. I'm coming too, I said. Caitlin shook her head. No, I need you here. Someone has to coordinate with Marin and keep tracking his other victims. Besides, she added with a grim smile, it's time I fought my own battles. Looking at her then, straight-backed, clear-eyed, ready for war, I finally saw what everyone else had been trying to tell me. My little sister didn't need my protection anymore. She needed my support. Okay, I agreed. But promise me one thing. What? Make him regret ever underestimating you. She picked up her purse, determination radiating from every movement. Oh, don't worry. By the time I'm done, Thomas won't dare scam another woman ever again. The next 24 hours were a blur of activity. While Caitlin and Seth flew to Cancun, Michaela and I worked with Marin to uncover the full scope of Thomas's deception. Another one, Michaela called out, scrolling through social media. Amanda from Phoenix, he used the name Michael with her, promised to help fund her startup. I added the information to our growing spreadsheet. How much? 40,000. She posted about it in a scam support group. My phone lit up with a text from Caitlin. Landed safely. Meeting Maria in an hour. Seth says Thomas is still at the hotel. Tell her to be careful, Michaela said, reading over my shoulder. She knows what she's doing. The words felt strange in my mouth, but true. How many victims are we up to now? 8 confirmed, including Caitlin. 3 more possibles. Michaela rubbed her eyes. He had a system. Target successful women, preferably ones who wanted something specific. A baby, a business, a fresh start. Gain their trust, then ask for an investment or loan. Marin walked in, carrying fresh coffee. The DA's office is very interested, especially after I showed them the pattern of wire transfers. My phone buzzed again. A photo from Seth this time. Thomas at the hotel bar, laughing with a woman I assumed was Maria. My blood boiled. He looks so normal, I said. Like he's not destroying lives. That's what makes men like him dangerous, Marin replied. They're charming, plausible, and completely without conscience. Another text from Caitlin. Maria is amazing. She recorded everything. Thomas promised her 300% returns on her investment by next month. Got it, Michaela exclaimed suddenly. Rachel just posted again. She's furious. Apparently Thomas disappeared with her credit cards while she was getting her hair done for the wedding. I couldn't help but laugh. He's scamming his own accomplice. She might not be an accomplice, Marin pointed out. Could be another victim who just got taken for more than the others. My phone rang. Caitlin. June, it's happening. Now. Her voice was steady but tense. Thomas just walked into the trap. I put the phone on speaker as Caitlin described the scene unfolding at the hotel bar. Maria had agreed to wear a wire, meeting Thomas, while Caitlin and Seth waited with local police. He's showing her the fake investment documents. Caitlin narrated quietly. The same ones he used on me. Same promises, different numbers. We could hear Thomas's voice in the background, smooth and confident. This opportunity won't last long. I can only hold your spot in the investment pool until tomorrow. Now, Caitlin whispered. Then louder, hello, Thomas. The silence that followed was deafening. Caitlin, Thomas stammered. What are you? Surprised to see me, or should I call you James? Michael, how many names are you using these days? This isn't what it looks like. Really. Because it looks like you're about to scam another woman, just like you scammed me, and June, and Rachel, and Amanda, and all the others. Others? Maria's voice cut in, sharp with anger. What others? Show him, Seth's voice commanded. We could hear rustling papers, then Thomas's sharp intake of breath. Bank transfers, Caitlin continued. Dating profiles, social media posts, everything, Thomas. We have everything. The police are here, Seth added. Both local and federal. Wire fraud across international borders is a serious offense. You can't prove anything, Thomas said. But his voice had lost its smoothness. Actually, we can. Maria's voice now, cold as ice. I recorded everything you promised me, just like the other women did. It's over, Caitlin said. The accounts are frozen. Rachel's talking to the police about the bigamy attempt. Your victims are coming forward. Through the phone, we heard the distinctive sound of handcuffs clicking. You have the right to remain silent, a heavily accented voice began. Wait, Thomas pleaded. Caitlin, please, we can work this out. I'll pay everything back, like you promised all the other women. Caitlin's voice was steel. No more promises, Thomas. No more lies. Just consequences. The call ended, and the office erupted in cheers. Michaela hugged me, both of us crying and laughing. "She did it," I whispered. "She really did it." Marin was already on her office phone, coordinating with authorities. They'll hold him for extradition. In the meantime, we can start recovery proceedings for the victims. My phone buzzed one final time. A message from Caitlin. It felt good, June. Really good. For the first time since this started, I feel like myself again. I smiled through my tears as I typed back, "I'm so proud of you, little sister." Because I was. Prouder than I'd ever been of anything in my life. The media circus hit before Caitlin even made it back from Cancun. Local news stations camped outside my apartment, hungry for details about the romance racketeer, as they'd dubbed Thomas. "Another victim has come forward," Michaela announced, hanging up her phone. "A woman in Seattle. He promised to help fund her daughter's medical treatment." "That's 9 confirmed victims now," Marin said, updating her files. "The DA is pushing for maximum sentences on all charges." My phone lit up with a text from Caitlin. "Landing in 30 minutes. There are reporters everywhere. I'll pick you up," I replied. Back entrance of the airport. The drive to the airport was tense. News vans followed us until I lost them by weaving through side streets. When I finally spotted Caitlin and Seth at the pickup area, they both looked exhausted but triumphant. "You won't believe what happened after the arrest," Caitlin said as she slid into the passenger seat. "Rachel showed up at the police station." "Thomas's almost bride?" I asked, pulling away from the curb. "She brought everything," Seth added from the back seat. "Account numbers, text messages, even recordings of Thomas bragging about his other scams. She was wearing a wire for the last 3 days. Turns out she's an investigative journalist," Caitlin explained. "She caught wind of Thomas's scams and got close to him on purpose. She's been building a story for months." I nearly missed a turn. "Are you serious?" "She wants to interview all of us," Caitlin continued. "She thinks sharing our stories might help other women avoid similar scams." "Speaking of stories," Seth interrupted, checking his phone. "You might want to see this." He passed his phone forward. A news website was running a headline. "Romance Scammers Victims Unite. Sisters Lead Charge Against International Fraudster." "It's gone viral," Seth said. "Women are sharing their own stories of romance scams in the comments. Thousands of them." Caitlin read through some comments. "These are heartbreaking. So many people lost everything to men, like Thomas." "That's why we need to speak out," I said, pulling into my apartment's parking garage. "Show them they're not alone, that they can fight back." Upstairs, Michaela and Marin were waiting with takeout and updates. The legal wheels were turning faster than expected, thanks to the mountain of evidence and Rachel's undercover work. "The DA wants to meet tomorrow," Marin said, between bites of pad thai. "They're offering a deal to Thomas, reduced sentences, if he helps identify other scammers in his network." "Has he taken it?" Caitlin asked. "Not yet. But Rachel recorded him mentioning partners in 3 countries. He's not working alone." "Of course he's not," Seth added. "These operations are usually connected. One scammer teaches another, shares techniques, victim profiles. Then we take them all down," Caitlin declared. "Every last one." My phone buzzed with a notification. A support group for romance scam victims had invited us to speak at their next meeting. "They want to know how we caught him," I said, showing Caitlin. "How we proved what he was doing." "We should do it," she replied immediately. "Help other victims build cases against their scammers." "It's not just about the money anymore, is it?" Michaela observed. Caitlin shook her head. "It never was. It's about justice. About showing these men they can't keep destroying lives without consequences." "Speaking of consequences," Marin interjected, "the first hearing is set for next week. Are you ready to testify?" "More than ready." Caitlin's voice was firm. "I want to look him in the eye when I tell my story. I want him to see exactly what he didn't break." A knock at the door made us all jump. Seth checked the security camera feed on his phone. "It's Rachel," he said. "With a camera crew." Already? I looked at Caitlin. We don't have to do this now. Yes, we do. She stood up, straightening her shoulders. Every minute we wait is another minute some other Thomas is out there, targeting another victim. Together, I asked, reaching for her hand. She squeezed back. Together. When we opened the door, Rachel looked nothing like the glamorous almost bride from the photos. She was professional, focused, and carried herself with the confidence of someone used to exposing hard truths. Ready to tell your story? She asked. Caitlin glanced around at our improvised war room. The evidence boards, the victim statements, the legal documents, and most importantly, the people who'd helped make justice possible. Actually, she said, we have a better idea. We don't want to just tell our story. We want to help others tell theirs. Show them how to fight back, how to win. Rachel's eyes lit up. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Shall we begin? As the camera crew set up, I watched my sister transform once again. From victim to victor, from target to warrior. Thomas had tried to steal her dreams, but he'd given her a new purpose instead. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just getting even. It's helping others rise up too. The courthouse buzzed with tension as Thomas was led into the courtroom. He looked smaller somehow, his designer suit replaced by prison orange, his confident smile nowhere to be seen. All rise, the bailiff called out. Caitlin gripped my hand as we stood. The gallery behind us was packed with victims. Not just Thomas's, but others who'd come to support the cause. Rachel sat in the front row, her notebook ready. Prosecution may begin their opening statement, the judge announced. Marin rose, her heels clicking against the floor. Your Honor, this case is about more than just one man's crimes. It's about a systematic pattern of deception that targeted vulnerable women across multiple states and countries. As she laid out the evidence, I watched Thomas's face. He flinched each time she mentioned a specific victim, each time she quoted an exact dollar amount. By the time she finished, he was staring at his hands. The defense may present their case. Thomas's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client acknowledges his actions, but wishes to cooperate fully. He has information about larger criminal networks involved in similar schemes. Objection, Marin cut in. The defendant's willingness to implicate others doesn't diminish his own culpability. Sustained, the judge ruled. When it was Caitlin's turn to testify, she walked to the stand with her head high. Thomas couldn't meet her eyes. Please state your name for the record. Caitlin Ross. Her voice was clear and strong. Though I'll be changing it back to Fowler as soon as possible. Tell us about your relationship with the defendant. Caitlin's testimony was devastating in its simplicity. She described their marriage, their struggles with infertility, his manipulation of both her and me. When she reached the part about discovering his theft, her voice didn't waver. And what was the total amount he stole from you and your sister? $120,000, Caitlin replied. Our entire savings, money that was meant for starting a family. Thomas shifted in his seat. His lawyer whispered something to him. But this isn't just about money, Caitlin continued. The defendant didn't just steal our savings. He stole trust, hope, dreams. And he did the same thing to at least 8 other women that we know of. The prosecution called more victims. Maria testified via video link from Mexico. Rachel presented her undercover recordings. Each story added another brick to the wall of evidence. During a brief recess, Seth showed us his phone. The hashtag Dover romance scam justice is trending. Women all over the world are sharing their stories. Good, Caitlin said firmly. That's exactly what we wanted. When court resumed, Thomas's lawyer announced that his client wished to change his plea to guilty on all counts. Very well, the judge said. Does the defendant wish to make a statement before sentencing? Thomas stood slowly. I'm sorry, I never meant... Objection. Marin interrupted. The defendant's bank records show systematic planning over several years. This was not a crime of impulse or necessity. Sustained, the judge ruled again. Mr. Ross, Do you have anything substantive to add? Thomas slumped back into his seat, shaking his head. The judge adjusted her glasses. Very well. Taking into account the severity of the crimes, the number of victims, and the international nature of this scheme, I sentence the defendant to 15 years in federal prison. Additionally, he is ordered to make full restitution to all victims, plus punitive damages. A murmur ran through the courtroom. 15 years. It felt both too much and not enough. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm ordering the defendant to cooperate fully with ongoing investigations into related criminal networks. Failure to do so will result in additional charges. As Thomas was led away, Caitlin turned to me. It's really over. Not quite, Rachel said, approaching us. My story airs tonight. We're calling it Sisters of Justice, how two women exposed an international romance scam ring. But more importantly, we're launching a victim support network. What kind of network? I asked. Legal aid, emotional support, resources for building cases against scammers. Everything we wished we'd had when this started, Caitlin explained. Rachel and I have been planning it. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed as victims hugged and celebrated. Mariah called from Mexico, crying happy tears. Michaela was already fielding calls from other women wanting to share their stories. Ready for the press conference? Seth asked. Caitlin straightened her jacket. Actually, I've been thinking, instead of just talking about what Thomas did, let's focus on what we're going to do, how we're going to help other victims become survivors, like you did, I said softly. She smiled, a real full smile that reached her eyes, like we did, together. As we walked toward the microphones, I realized something profound. Thomas hadn't just created victims, he'd accidentally created warriors, and we were just getting started. Welcome to the first annual Survivors Summit, Caitlin announced to the packed auditorium. When my sister and I started this journey, we never imagined we'd be standing here today. I watched from the wings as she commanded the stage, hardly believing this confident speaker was the same woman who'd collapsed in tears on my couch just months ago. Each of you has a story, she continued. Each of you has faced betrayal, felt shame, questioned your judgment. Today, we're going to change that narrative. The audience, mostly women, but some men too, leaned forward in their seats. Many were taking notes, others were nodding, tears in their eyes. June? Rachel touched my arm. You're up next. I joined Caitlin on stage as she introduced me. My sister taught me something important. She taught me that sometimes helping doesn't mean fixing everything yourself. Sometimes it means standing beside someone while they find their own strength. The presentation screen behind us displayed the numbers. Over 300 victims helped, 12 scammers arrested, millions in restitution secured. But the real victory was in the faces before us. People who'd found their voice, their power, their community. Maria appeared on the video screen, live from Mexico. Thanks to the network, we've identified 3 major romance scam operations in Latin America. 2 have already been shut down. Michaela took the podium next, explaining how to spot red flags and document evidence. Seth followed with a presentation on digital security. Maureen closed with updates on legislative efforts to increase penalties for romance fraud. During the break, a young woman approached us. I lost everything to a scammer last month, she said, wiping her eyes. I was too ashamed to tell anyone until I saw your story. What's your name? Caitlin asked gently. Sarah. Well, Sarah, look around this room. Every person here understands exactly what you're feeling. And every person here is proof that you can recover, rebuild, and come back stronger. But how? Sarah's voice cracked. He took my savings, my self-respect. Then let's get them back, I said, pulling out my phone. Marin has an opening tomorrow morning. Seth can start tracking the money trail. And Rachel's support group meets tonight. Sarah's eyes widened. Just like that? Just like that, Caitlin confirmed. Because that's what this network is about. No one fights alone anymore. After the summit, we gathered at my apartment. the same place where we'd first started piecing together Thomas's crimes. But now the evidence boards were replaced with success stories, the legal documents with thank you letters. "I have news," Caitlin announced, holding up her phone. "The fertility clinic called. My first IVF treatment is scheduled for next week." The room erupted in cheers. Michaela popped open champagne, while Rachel hugged Caitlin fiercely. "How are you feeling about it?" I asked softly. "Scared, excited, ready." She smiled. "And grateful for my real family. The one that stood by me, not the one that tried to destroy me." "Speaking of family," Marin called from the kitchen. "Tell them the other news." Caitlin blushed. "The publisher wants to turn our story into a book. Not just about Thomas, but about everything that came after. About building this network, helping other survivors. About two sisters who turned pain into purpose." Rachel added, "I'm helping write it." Seth raised his glass. "To the Sisters of Justice." "No," Caitlin corrected, reaching for my hand. "To all of us. Every survivor, every helper, every person who refuses to let the Thomases of the world win." "To justice," I agreed, squeezing her hand. Later, as our friends chatted and planned future summits, Caitlin pulled me aside. "Remember when you tried to fix everything by writing that check?" she asked. I winced. Not my finest moment. Actually, it was, because that mistake led me here. She gestured around the room. "I needed to learn to fight my own battles, but I also needed to know you had my back while I learned." "I'll always have your back," I promised. "I know, and now we have hundreds of people's backs, thousands, maybe." She touched her stomach gently. "When this baby comes, they'll be born into a family of warriors." The doorbell rang. More survivors, arriving for the evening support session. As Caitlin moved to welcome them, I watched her embrace each person, listened as she asked their names, their stories. Thomas had tried to steal her dreams, but he'd given her a bigger one instead. He'd wanted to break her spirit, but he'd helped her find her purpose. In trying to tear apart two sisters, he'd created a sisterhood of survivors that stretched across continents. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just winning the battle, it's changing the whole war, and we were just getting started.
My name's Sarah, a 29-year-old accountant with a knack for numbers and a love for a well-balanced budget. I'm married to Alex, a man whose sense of humor is as strong as his love for me. We live in a small, well-appointed apartment I inherited and spruced up over the years. It's our little haven, filled with the laughter and love of a young, happy couple. One lazy Sunday, as I was reconciling some accounts, Alex lounged on the sofa, chuckling at something on his phone. "Hey, money wizard, any chance you can conjure up a feast for lunch?" he joked, looking up at me with a grin. Rolling my eyes, I replied, "With your spending habits? I'd need real magic for that." Our banter was interrupted by the doorbell. It was Mrs. Thompson, Alex's mother, standing at the doorstep with her usual air of disdain hidden poorly behind a strained smile. "Hello, dear," she greeted, her eyes immediately scanning the apartment. "Hi, Mom," Alex said, getting up to hug her. "What brings you here today?" "Oh, just wanted to see how you two are managing in this tiny place," she replied, her voice dripping with a tone that suggested she found our living situation pitiable. I bit my tongue, offering a polite smile. "Would you like some coffee, Mrs. Thompson?" As I set about making coffee, I overheard their conversation from the kitchen. Mrs. Thompson was lamenting her financial difficulties, the costs of maintaining her large, old house apparently overwhelming her. "It's just so much, Alex. I don't know how I'll manage," she sighed dramatically. Alex looked concerned. "Mom, we can help out. Maybe we can give you some money each month, help ease the burden?" My heart sank. We were doing well, but we weren't wealthy. Still, the thought of his mother struggling was enough for Alex to offer. I brought in the coffee, sitting down as they discussed figures. $1,000 a month? Alex suggested, looking over at me for approval. I nodded, masking my concern. If it helps, Mrs. Thompson, we're happy to help. She accepted with a quick, almost too eager nod. You're such good children. I don't know what I'd do without you. Yet, as she sipped her coffee, her eyes lingered on the renovated kitchen, the sleek appliances, and the comfortable furniture. Of course, if you could afford such nice things for yourselves, maybe you could spare a little more. She mused, her voice trailing off suggestively. Alex was about to speak, but I cut in. We'll start with the 1,000 and see how things go. We have to be mindful of our own expenses, after all. Mrs. Thompson seemed a bit put off, but covered it with a tight smile. Of course, dear. I appreciate anything you can do. After she left, Alex and I sat in a heavy silence. Are we doing the right thing? He finally asked, his brows furrowed in worry. I reached for his hand. We're helping your mom, that's important. But let's not dive into deep waters we can't swim out of, okay? He squeezed my hand back, the weight of our decision settling in. Okay, he agreed, but I could tell the matter wasn't settled in his heart. The rest of the day passed quietly, with both of us lost in our thoughts. The air in the apartment felt different now, charged with the responsibility we had taken on and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. As night fell, I couldn't shake the feeling that Mrs. Thompson's visit was just the beginning of a larger challenge we would face together. But whatever it was, we'd face it as a team, as we always did. Weeks after Mrs. Thompson's visit, the routine of our life resumed, the uneasy feeling of the financial commitment lingering like a stubborn fog. Then, out of the blue, we got news that turned our world upside down. I was pregnant. The joy was overwhelming. Alex's face lit up like a Christmas tree when I told him, his laughter echoing in the apartment. We're going to be parents, Sarah. Can you believe it? He exclaimed, lifting me in a whirlwind hug. Laughing and a bit dizzy, I replied, believe it? I'm already planning the budget for baby shoes and college. The news of the baby brought a new wave of visits from Mrs. Thompson. One evening, she arrived with an unusual spark in her eye. I have a proposal for you too, she began, settling herself on the sofa as if preparing for a long discussion. Alex and I exchanged a look, trepidation mixing with curiosity. What kind of proposal? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. It's simple. You need more space for the baby, and I need less of a burden. I move in with my daughter, and you move into my house, she declared, her voice carrying a note of finality. I choked on my tea. Move in, to your house? The image of her large, run-down home flashed in my mind, the creaky floors and peeling paint a stark contrast to our cozy apartment. Alex, ever the optimist, chimed in. That's an idea, Mom. But Sarah's right. Your house needs a lot of work. Undeterred, Mrs. Thompson continued. Think of it, Alex. Your child can grow up in the house you did. And with Sarah's knack for budgeting, you can turn it into something beautiful. I could see Alex's eyes soften at the thought, the sentimental value of his childhood home pulling at him. But practicality nipped at my mind. It's a big decision, Mrs. Thompson. And a big project. We need to think it over, discuss the costs, the work. But she was on a roll. You won't get a better offer. Space for the baby, a family home. It's perfect. Think fast, though. I don't want to be a burden on my daughter for long. The conversation spun around us, Alex caught in memories and possibilities, Mrs. Thompson pressing her point, and me, trying to anchor it all in reality. We'll talk it over, I finally said, cutting through the chatter. We need time to decide what's best for our family. After she left, the apartment felt too small, the walls closing in with the weight of her proposal. Alex paced, torn between nostalgia and the reality of the massive undertaking. Sarah, it could be great, right? The baby, the house. But it's a lot, he said, running his hands through his hair. I took his hands, steadying him. Let's sleep on it. Make lists, pros and cons. We do this right, or not at all. He nodded, the worry lines easing a bit. You're right. As always. Let's figure this out together. That night, sleep was elusive, the future a jumble of cribs and construction. But as I lay there, listening to Alex's steady breathing, I knew whatever decision we made, we'd face the consequences, good or bad, as one. The thought was a small comfort in the sea of uncertainty that Mrs. Thompson's unexpected proposal had plunged us into. After many sleepless nights and endless discussions, Alex and I decided to take on the challenge. The prospect of creating a loving home for our baby in his childhood house won over the daunting task ahead. All right, let's do this. But we're doing it our way, no cutting corners, I declared one morning, determination firm in my voice. Alex smiled, his usual optimism shining through. That's my girl. It'll be our project, our home. The house stood as I remembered, large and looming, its once grand features now dulled by time and neglect. As we walked through the creaking doors, the reality of what we'd taken on hit me. What have we gotten ourselves into? I murmured, more to myself than to Alex. He wrapped an arm around me. Hey, it's going to be great. A bit of paint here, some new floors there. I raised an eyebrow. And the plumbing, electrics, heating. My voice trailed off as the list grew longer in my mind. We brought in a designer, Tom, a friend known for his practical yet stylish eye. Okay, let's see what we've got, Tom said, clipboard in hand, ready to tackle the beast. Room by room, we assessed, planned, and budgeted. The numbers were dizzying, but every decision was made with our future in mind. The workers started, their presence a constant in the once quiet house. Dust and noise became our new normal, but with each completed task, the place began to transform. One particularly chaotic day, as I navigated through ladders and paint cans, I found Alex staring at the nursery, a soft smile on his face. Can you imagine it, Sarah? Our little one right here? I joined him, envisioning the room not as it was, but as it would be. It'll be beautiful, Alex. The perfect place for baby naps and bedtime stories. The days turned into weeks, and slowly the house began to resemble a home. The sagging ceilings were now sturdy and smooth, the walls fresh with paint. The old, grimy windows replaced with clear glass that let the light flood in. Each evening, we reviewed the progress, our excitement growing with every box ticked off the list. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Delays and unexpected repairs tested our patience and budget. Another issue? What now? I'd ask, frustration mounting as Tom relayed the latest hiccup. Plumbing's older than we thought. Needs more work, but we'll get it done, Tom would assure, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to my frazzled nerves. Despite the setbacks, we pushed forward, driven by the vision of our family in this home. And as the final touches were put in place, the house, once a daunting project, stood proud and welcoming, a testament to our hard work and love. Exhausted but elated, we stepped back, taking in the sight. We did it, Sarah. We actually did it, Alex said, his voice thick with emotion. I leaned into him, the house behind us no longer just a building, but a symbol of our new beginning. We sure did, love. Now, let's get ready to welcome our little one into it. With that, we turned and walked into our future, ready for whatever it might hold. Just as we settled into our newly renovated home, savoring the calm after months of relentless work, our world was turned upside down again. It was a crisp Saturday morning, and we were out getting some fresh air and much-needed couple time. When we turned the corner onto our street, my heart dropped. A moving truck was parked in front of our house, and men were carrying out our furniture. What the? Alex's voice trailed off as we hurried toward the chaos. As we pushed through the front door, the sight that greeted us was like a punch to the gut. Mrs. Thompson and her daughter, Carol, were there, directing the movers with an air of authority that left no room for questions. "What in the world is going on here?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. Mrs. Thompson turned to us, a smirk playing on her lips. "Oh, Sarah, Alex, good, you're here. I've decided it's time I move back into my house." "Your house? We just spent months turning this place around, not to mention the money we poured into it." Alex's voice rose, his usual calm demeanor gone. Carol chimed in, her tone just as cold as her mother's. "Well, it's a family house, and we're family. It's only right we live here. Plus, think of how nice it'll be for my kids in that lovely nursery you fixed up." I felt like I was in a bad dream, the room spinning around me. "But you told us to move in here. You pushed for this. We have a baby on the way, for goodness sake." Mrs. Thompson shrugged, her gaze void of any sympathy. "Things change, dear. I needed a break, and you provided it. But now, it's time for you to go back to your little apartment." The reality of her words hit me like a tidal wave. All our work, all our dreams for this house, were being ripped away without a second thought. I glanced at Alex, his face a mask of shock and hurt. "Mom, you can't do this. We have rights. We'll fight this," he stammered, the fight in his voice not matching the defeat in his eyes. Mrs. Thompson laughed, a sound that chilled me to the bone. "Good luck with that. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a house to settle into." We were ushered out like strangers, our belongings piled haphazardly on the lawn. The movers didn't meet our eyes, their actions mechanical and detached. As we sat amidst boxes and bags, the life we had built within those walls now locked away from us, Alex put his arm around me. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I just never imagined." I leaned into him, the tears I'd been holding back finally breaking free. "It's not your fault, Alex. We were conned, plain and simple." The following days were a blur of anger, disbelief, and an unyielding sense of betrayal. We were back in our apartment, surrounded by boxes that were meant for a different life. Alex was quiet, his usual light extinguished by the shock. I was fuming, pacing the small space like a caged animal. "We need to do something, Alex. We can't let them get away with this," I exclaimed, my voice sharp with frustration. Alex, looking up from the sea of papers he had been sifting through, met my gaze. "I know, Sarah. And I think I have something that might help." My heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" He held up his phone, a determined glint in his eye. "Remember the day she proposed the switch?" I had recorded the conversation, just a gut feeling. It's all here, her admitting it was her house, but encouraging us to move in, to invest. I felt a surge of hope, mixed with a bitter satisfaction. That could be our leverage. We contacted a lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Janet who had a reputation for being a bulldog in court. She listened intently as we relayed our story, the recording playing a pivotal role. "This is good," Janet nodded after hearing the recording. "It's not a straightforward case, but it's a start. We'll need more, though. Receipts, contracts, any communication about the renovations." We spent the next few days gathering every piece of evidence we could find. Every receipt felt like a tiny weapon in our fight to reclaim not just the house, but our dignity and future. The day we presented our case to Janet, her office was stark and uninviting, but her focus was unwavering. "This is solid," she said, sifting through the papers. "We'll file for deception and undue influence. It's going to be a battle, but I think we have a shot." The weeks leading up to the court date were tense. We were a mix of nerves and grim determination. The thought of facing Mrs. Thompson and Carol in court made my stomach churn. On the day, as we sat in the sterile courtroom, I held Alex's hand tightly. Mrs. Thompson and Carol sat across from us, their faces masks of cool indifference. As the proceedings began, Janet was fierce, laying out our case with a precision that left no room for doubt. Mrs. Thompson's lawyer tried to counter, but the recording, the receipts, they all painted a clear picture of deceit. When it was Mrs. Thompson's turn to speak, her voice was shaky, a stark contrast to the confident, almost smug tone she had used when kicking us out. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just needed some help, and I thought. Thank you, no further questions. Janet cut her off, turning back to the judge with a nod. The rest of the trial was a blur of legal jargon and closing arguments. As we waited for the judge to deliver his verdict, I felt Alex's hand grip mine, his palm sweaty. The judge finally looked up, his gaze sweeping over the courtroom. After reviewing the evidence and testimonies, I find in favor of the plaintiffs. It is clear that there was a calculated effort to mislead and benefit from their investments. Relief flooded through me, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. Alex let out a long breath, his body sagging slightly. As we walked out of the courtroom, the world seemed a little brighter, a little more hopeful. We did it, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Alex pulled me into a hug, right there on the courthouse steps. We did, he agreed, his voice steady and sure. And now, we move forward. The battle was over, but the war had left its scars. As we started the journey back to our apartment, the future was uncertain, but one thing was clear, we were stronger together, and no matter what came next, we would face it as a team. After the legal victory, the weight of the past months began to lift, but the task of truly moving on was still ahead of us. The first order of business was to clear out the house, our house, as the court had affirmed, at least in terms of the investment we'd made. Alex and I returned, not as residents, but as reclaimers of our peace and investment. We methodically removed every piece of furniture, every appliance, and even the fancy new plumbing fixtures we'd installed. Each item carried out was a chapter of our ordeal, closed and packed away. I can't believe we're stripping the house bare, Alex said, his voice echoing in the now hollow space. It's only what we put into it, I reminded him, my voice firm with a resolve that hadn't been there before. As we worked, Mrs. Thompson arrived, her eyes wide as she saw the shell of what had once been her home. She began to sob, her body shaking with each heave. Please, I didn't mean for any of this. I'm so sorry. Can't we just forget all this happened? She pleaded, her voice desperate. Alex and I exchanged a look, the shared pain and betrayal still fresh between us. We're beyond sorry now, Alex said. We're just doing what's fair. With the house emptied of our contributions, we also cut the financial cord that had bound us to Mrs. Thompson. The monthly checks we had been sending were no more. It was a hard decision, but necessary for us to truly start anew. The final blow to Mrs. Thompson's crumbling world came when she had to face the financial consequences of her actions. In order to reimburse us for the extensive and costly renovations, she was forced to sell the house. The place that had been a symbol of her deceit now had to be let go, the proceeds going towards paying us back. The news of the sale came to us not with joy but with a quiet acknowledgement of the closure it brought. We had no desire to revel in her downfall, we simply wanted to move forward. In the end, Mrs. Thompson stood in the doorway of what was once her home, now belonging to another family, her eyes red from tears. I'm so sorry, she whispered again, her voice lost in the shuffle of movers and the bustle of new occupants. We left her there, her apologies a faint echo in our determined stride away. Our path led back to our apartment, to the life we had been building before everything went awry. We walked hand in hand, not looking back. The apartment welcomed us with open arms, its walls ready to be filled with new memories and laughter. And as we settled back into the rhythm of our life, the nursery awaiting its occupant, we knew that we had come out of this stronger. We had fought for our future, for our family, and no matter what else lay ahead, we would face it together. Life has a funny way of smoothing out the edges after a storm. Our apartment, once a temporary shelter, had transformed back into a loving home. With the past finally behind us, Alex and I focused on the future, especially with our baby's arrival just around the corner. One evening, as I was arranging some baby clothes, Alex came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "You know, I can't wait to meet our little one. It's like the start of something amazing, isn't it?" he said, his voice warm and excited. I leaned back into his embrace, feeling the gentle kick from our unborn child. It really is. After everything, this feels like we've been given a fresh start, a new chapter. We spent our evenings planning and dreaming, talking about the kind of parents we wanted to be, the things we wanted to teach our child. The nursery, once a source of contention, was now a haven of hope and anticipation, filled with soft colors and the gentle lullabies that floated from a music box. The day our daughter was born, the world seemed to stand still. She was perfect, a tiny bundle of joy that instantly became the center of our universe. Holding her for the first time, I felt a surge of love so powerful it nearly overwhelmed me. As we sat there, in the quiet of the nursery, the world outside continuing on, I realized that this was what true happiness felt like. It wasn't about the absence of conflict or the avoidance of challenges. It was about facing them head-on, together, and coming out the other side stronger and more united. I'm Bella, 27, and by no means a pushover. I work as a secretary, a job that has me juggling calls and coffee, all while trying to keep a straight face when my boss cracks one of his stale jokes. Life was a regular routine until that night at a friend's party when I bumped into Jake. Jake was a tall, lanky guy with a smile that could light up the room. He had that effortless charm about him, cracking jokes one minute and deep in thought the next. We got talking, and before I knew it, hours had passed. "Hey, I'm Jake. You look like you could use a better drink than that," he said, nodding at the almost empty plastic cup in my hand. I raised an eyebrow, "And you look like you've got a better suggestion?" "Follow me and find out," he grinned, leading the way to where the real party was, a table laden with all sorts of drinks. We spent the evening talking about everything and nothing. His jokes were actually funny, a refreshing change from the dry humor I was used to at work. As the party wound down, we exchanged numbers. "Don't be a stranger," Jake said as he left, "or do, but only if you're into that mystery vibe." I laughed, tucking away his number. "We'll see, funny guy." As I headed home, I couldn't shake off the feeling that this was the beginning of something. But that night, it was just the city lights, the lingering laughter from the party, and the slight buzz from the drinks. The next few weeks were a blur of texts and calls with Jake. He was like a breath of fresh air, always popping up with a joke or a plan to meet up. It was hard not to get swept up in his energy. Then came the day he invited me over to his place. "You gotta meet the folks," he said casually, as if it wasn't a big deal. "Meet your parents?" I hesitated. "Aren't we moving a bit fast?" "Nah, they're cool. Plus, I want them to meet the girl who's been stealing all my time," he joked, but I could tell he was serious. I agreed, not knowing what I was walking into. Looking back, I wish I had taken a bit more time, maybe then I would have seen what was coming. But life doesn't give you a heads up, does it? No, it just throws you in the deep end and watches as you try to swim. The day to meet Jake's parents came quicker than I'd have liked. I remember standing in front of my closet, trying to pick out something that said, "Nice to meet you," and not, "I'm here to steal your son." Finally, settling on a simple dress, I took a deep breath and headed out. Jake's house was one of those big, sprawling places with a garden out front. Flowers, trees, you name it, his mom had it growing there. "She'll love to show you around," Jake had said with an enthusiasm I didn't quite share. As we walked up to the door, Jake squeezed my hand. "Don't worry, they're going to love you." The door swung open, and there stood Mrs. Green, a woman with a stern look that could make a grown man flinch. "So, this is her," she said, eyeing me from head to toe. Not exactly the warm welcome I was hoping for. "Mom, this is Bella." "Bella, my mother," Jake introduced. "Charmed," I said, extending my hand. She gave a nod, her lips tight. "Come in. Let's not stand around." The inside of the house was as immaculate as the garden. We sat in the living room, and that's when the interrogation began. Mrs. Green didn't waste any time. "So, Bella, Jake tells us you're a secretary. That must be interesting," she said, the word interesting hanging in the air like it was a bad smell. "Yeah, it's got its moments. Keeps me on my toes," I replied, trying to keep it light. "And your boss, he's a man, I presume," she prodded, her eyes narrowing. I nodded. "Yes, he is. A very professional and respectful one." Mrs. Green hummed, as if she had expected as much. "I suppose you spend a lot of time together, being his secretary and all." I could feel the insinuation heavy in her tone. Jake jumped in. "Mom, come on, let's not start this." "No, it's okay," I said, feeling a need to defend myself. "We work together, but that's it. There's nothing more." Mrs. Green looked at me, then at Jake, and then back to me. "I see. Well, as long as it's professional." The conversation stumbled on, every topic somehow circling back to my job or my relationship with my boss. It was like she had a one-track mind set on making me uncomfortable. At one point, Jake excused himself to take a call, leaving me alone with his mother. "You know, my son could do a lot better than a secretary," she said, her voice low but clear. I was taken aback. "I'm sorry you feel that way. I care a lot about Jake, and I'm not here to cause any trouble." Mrs. Green stood up, her posture rigid. "Just so we're clear, I have my eye on you. Any slip up, and I'll make sure Jake sees sense." The threat hung between us, heavy and cold. I sat there, trying to process what just happened. It was clear this wasn't going to be easy. When Jake came back, I plastered a smile on my face, but inside, I was reeling. After a few months of dating, Jake and I decided it was time to take the next step, moving in together. I remember the day I left my small, cozy apartment, boxes in hand, a mix of excitement and nerves bubbling in my stomach. Jake was all grins, helping me settle into what was now our place. It was nice, waking up next to him every morning, sharing coffee and lazy weekends. But as they say, good things never last, especially if Mrs. Green has anything to say about it. One Saturday morning, as we were lounging around, the doorbell rang. Jake went to answer it, and in came Mrs. Green, her eyes scanning the room like she was looking for something, or rather, someone to criticize. "Mother, what a surprise," Jake said, clearly caught off guard. "Save it, Jacob. I know what's going on here," she snapped, her eyes finally landing on me. "Living in sin, are we?" Jake's face turned red. "Mom, it's not like that. We're serious about each other." She scoffed. "Serious? Please. You barely know her." I stood up, feeling the need to defend our relationship. "Mrs. Green, I care about Jake, and we're happy together." "Happy?" She laughed, a harsh sound that filled the room. "Let's see how happy you are when the novelty wears off." She walked around, inspecting the place like she was going to find something incriminating. Her eyes landed on a photo of Jake and me at a beach. "And what's this?" "Hardly appropriate, wouldn't you say?" Jake tried to intervene. "Mom, that's enough." But she was on a roll. "I won't have my son shacking up with just anyone. What will people think?" I could feel the anger rising in me. "We're not hurting anyone. We're adults, making our own decisions." Mrs. Green turned to me, her gaze sharp. "You may have fooled my son, but you don't fool me. I see right through you." The argument escalated from there, voices raised, words thrown like punches. In the end, Mrs. Green left, but not before declaring, "This isn't over." Her visit left a sour taste, the tension hanging between Jake and me. We tried to brush it off, go about our day, but it wasn't the same. Her words echoed in the back of my mind, a constant reminder of the disapproval looming over us. As days turned into weeks, the strain grew. Small arguments became regular, each one chipping away at the happiness we had built. I couldn't shake the feeling that Mrs. Green was somewhere out there, smirking, pleased with the chaos she had sown. One night, I worked late. The project was a beast, and everyone had left except me and my boss, who was in his office doing who knows what. "Bella, you still here?" my boss called out as he finally emerged. "Yeah, just finishing up this report," I replied, stretching my arms. "Late night, huh? Let me drive you home." "It's not safe this late," he offered. I was tired, the thought of waiting for a bus wasn't appealing, so I agreed. We walked to his car, making small talk about the day. It was all very normal until we pulled up to my place. "Thanks for the ride," I said, reaching for the door. "No problem, Bella. See you tomorrow," he replied with a tired smile. As I got out of the car, I didn't notice Jake standing there, his face a mix of anger and hurt. I realized too late as he stormed towards me. "Bella, what the hell is this?" Jake shouted, his eyes darting from me to my boss driving away. "It's not what it looks like, Jake. He was just giving me a ride home," I tried to explain. "A ride home? At this hour? With him?" He was fuming, not listening to a word I said. "Jake, please, you're overreacting. It's late, I was alone at the office, and he offered to drive me. That's all," I pleaded. "All, huh? And I'm supposed to believe that?" His voice was loud, attracting a few glances from neighbors. "I'm telling you the truth. Why won't you believe me?" My voice cracked, the frustration and hurt bubbling up. "Because I know men like him. And you, out late, with your boss? It's not right," he accused. "Jake, you're being ridiculous. Nothing is going on." "I love you," I said, my voice firm. He scoffed. "Yeah? Well, it sure doesn't look like it." The argument went back and forth, each accusation more hurtful than the last. Eventually, he stormed off, leaving me standing there, alone and bewildered. I grabbed a few essentials and headed back to my old place. The night was quiet, but my mind was a loud mess of thoughts and worries. I couldn't believe a simple act of kindness from my boss would lead to this. No sooner had I settled into my old, now strangely unfamiliar bed, the phone rang. It was Mrs. Green. Her voice oozed satisfaction. "Well, Bella, seems like you've moved back." "Can't say I'm surprised." I knew it was only a matter of time. Her laughter was cold, ringing in my ears long after I had hung up. I lay there, the weight of her words pressing down on me. I realized then that this was far from over. Her glee at my predicament was just another reminder of the uphill battle I was facing, not just with Jake, but with his entire family. And as I drifted into a restless sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread for what was yet to come. Life was quiet after the big blowout with Jake. I kept to myself, trying to mend the pieces of my bruised heart. Days turned into weeks, and just as I started to feel a bit like my old self again, life decided to throw me another curveball. I found out I was pregnant. I remember sitting in my bathroom, staring at the positive test. A mix of emotions flooded through me: fear, excitement, but mostly a deep, nagging worry about how Jake would react. I debated telling him, going back and forth in my mind, but eventually, I decided against it. I would raise this child on my own. But secrets have a way of coming out, and this one was no different. Jake found out. I still don't know how, but one day, there he was, standing at my door, looking as shocked and scared as I felt. "Bella, is it true? Are we going to have a baby?" he stammered, his face pale. I nodded, unable to form words. The silence stretched between us, heavy and awkward. "Why didn't you tell me, Bella? Why?" he finally managed, his voice a mix of hurt and anger. I was scared, Jake. Scared of how you'd react, scared of doing this all alone, I confessed, the words tumbling out. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I knew all too well. We should have talked about it. It's not just your decision, Bella. I knew he was right, but at the moment, it didn't seem that simple. I know, and I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do. We talked for hours, going in circles, the same arguments, the same fears. But as the night wore on, something shifted. We started to see not just the challenges, but the possibilities. Maybe, just maybe, we could do this together. In a decision that surprised both of us, we agreed to start over. We decided to get married, but this time, we'd do it our way, away from all the drama and judgment. A simple courthouse ceremony, just us and a couple of friends. It was quick, maybe a bit impulsive, but it felt right. The day we got married was nothing like I'd ever imagined. No fancy dress, no big party. Just the two of us, exchanging vows in a small, stuffy room. But when I looked into Jake's eyes, I knew it was perfect. We kept it a secret, not ready to deal with the fallout from his family, especially Mrs. Green. We needed time to adjust, to prepare for the baby, to figure out how we were going to handle everything. It was our little bubble of happiness, fragile, but ours. Jake and I were living in our little world, trying to prepare for the baby's arrival. But we both knew we couldn't keep our secret forever. The day finally came when Jake decided it was time to tell his parents. We gotta do it, Bella. They need to know about the baby, about us, he insisted one morning, a determined look on his face. I was scared, to say the least. But what about your mom? You know she's gonna flip. He took my hands in his. I'll handle Mom. You just focus on you and the baby. So, we went to his parents' house. My heart was pounding as we walked up the driveway. The door opened, and there stood Mrs. Green, looking as stern as ever. Jacob, what are you doing here? And you brought her, she said, eyeing me with disdain. Mom, we've got something to tell you. It's important, Jake said, stepping in front of me slightly. She let us in, the curiosity clear on her face. We all sat down, the tension thick in the air. Jake took a deep breath and began. Mom, Dad, Bella, and I got married a few months back. And we're expecting a baby. There was a moment of stunned silence before Mrs. Green erupted. Married? A baby? How could you be so irresponsible? Mom, it's not like that. We love each other. We're happy, Jake tried to explain. Happy? Look at her. She's trapped you with this child, Mrs. Green accused, pointing a finger at me. I felt my face heat up. I didn't trap anyone. This baby is a blessing, not a trap. Don't talk back to me, girl. I know your type, she snapped. Jake stood up, his face red with anger. Enough, Mom. This is my life, my wife, my child. If you can't accept that, then maybe we don't need to be part of yours. The room fell silent, Mrs. Green's face red with anger, but there was a flicker of something else, maybe fear, maybe realization. Mr. Green, who had been silent till now, put a hand on her shoulder, a silent plea. She looked at him, then back at us, her face softening just a fraction. I need time to process this. We left shortly after, the air between us heavy but hopeful. As we drove away, Jake squeezed my hand. That went better than expected. I laughed, despite everything. Yeah, if you consider World War III better than expected. But it was out now, the truth. We were married, expecting a baby, and for better or worse, his family knew. It felt like a weight had been lifted, but at the same time, a new worry had settled in. How would Mrs. Green react once the news really sunk in? Would she come around, or would she be an ever-present thorn in our side? Only time would tell, but for now, we had each other, and that was enough. As we drove home, the sun setting in the distance, I felt a sense of peace. We were together, we were strong, and no matter what came our way, we'd face it together, as a family. A few weeks had passed since the big reveal to Jake's parents. Things were quiet, almost eerily so. Then, one afternoon, Mrs. Green showed up at our door, unannounced, with a homemade cake in hand. "Bella, I baked this for you. A peace offering, let's say," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I was taken aback, not sure what to make of this sudden gesture. Thanks, Mrs. Green. That's unexpected." She smiled, a bit too sweetly. "Call me Mother, dear. After all, we are family now." After some awkward small talk, she left, leaving the cake on the kitchen counter. I invited a friend over to share the cake. "Hey, Lisa, wanna come over for some cake?" It's a long story. Lisa arrived, and I cut the cake, serving us both a piece. But as fate would have it, she was on a new diet kick and refused at the last minute. "You know what, I'll take it home for later. My cheat day's tomorrow." She laughed, wrapping up a big slice. I shrugged and took a bite of mine. It was delicious, almond flavor bursting in my mouth. But as the evening wore on, I started feeling odd, queasy. I chalked it up to pregnancy nausea and went to bed early. But the nausea didn't go away, it got worse. By midnight, I was violently ill, and Jake rushed me to the hospital. After what felt like endless tests and worried looks from doctors, they told us the shocking news. There was a toxic substance in my system, something commonly used in gardening to kill pests. Jake's face went white as he realized the implication. "The cake, my mom." I was too weak to respond, a cold dread settling in my stomach. Had Mrs. Green really tried to harm me, to harm her own grandchild? I was kept in the hospital overnight, and by morning, I was feeling a bit better, but the emotional toll was immense. Jake was a mess, torn between worry for me and disbelief that his mother could do such a thing. We were talking on the phone about it, Jake's voice heavy with concern. "We need to figure out what to do next," when suddenly the door to my room creaked open, and in walked Mrs. Green. I quickly muted the phone but didn't hang up, Jake still listening in. "Bella, how are you feeling, dear?" she asked, her voice dripping with faux concern. I looked at her, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. "I'd been better," I said, coldly. She tooted. "Such a shame about the sickness." "And the baby?" "The baby is fine," I replied, watching her reaction closely. Her face faltered for just a moment, a flash of disappointment crossing her features. "Well, that's good to hear," she said, but the words felt hollow. Then, with a smirk, she added, "Of course, you have no proof of what caused your little incident." I made sure of that when I threw away the rest of that cake first thing this morning. My heart raced, Jake still on the line, hearing every word. She had just admitted to it, not realizing the call was still connected. As she turned to leave, I looked down at the phone, a plan forming in my mind. Mrs. Green might think she's covered her tracks, but she was wrong. We had her confession, and now it was time to make her face the consequences. After Mrs. Green left the hospital room, I called Lisa, who thankfully hadn't eaten her piece yet. She was horrified by the news, and agreed to bring the cake to the police as evidence. Then I dialed Jake again. "Jake, did you hear all that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, every single word," he replied, anger seething through his tone. "I can't believe she'd go this far. I'm coming back to the hospital, and we're going to the police. We've got her now, Bella." By the time Jake arrived, I had managed to steady my nerves. Together, we went to the police station, the phone recording in hand. The officers listened intently, their expressions growing grimmer with every word Mrs. Green had unwittingly spilled. They assured us they would investigate immediately. The next few days were a blur of police visits, interviews, and a growing sense of dread about what was to come. Mrs. Green was brought in for questioning, and with the evidence stacked against her, she had no choice but to confess to her horrendous act. The news of her arrest spread quickly, and suddenly, the whole town was buzzing about the scandal. Jake stayed by my side through it all, his support unwavering. "I'm so sorry, Bella. I never thought she'd do something like this." "I know, Jake. But we're together in this, that's what matters," I reassured him, squeezing his hand. The trial date was set quickly, given the severity of the crime. Mrs. Green faced the judge, her usual stern demeanor replaced by a look of defeat. The evidence was undeniable, and she was found guilty of attempted poisoning. The sentence was harsh, but just, given the potential consequences of her actions. As we walked out of the courtroom, Jake and I both felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. It was over, but at such a cost. His mother, the woman who had raised him, was now behind bars because of her own twisted actions. We decided it was time to move on, to focus on the future and the arrival of our baby. The house felt quieter, the air lighter, as if a dark cloud had been lifted. Our friends and family rallied around us, their support a constant source of comfort. One evening, as we sat on the porch, Jake wrapped his arm around me. "We've been through hell, Bella, but we made it. I love you, and I can't wait to start this new chapter with our little one." I leaned into him, my head resting on his shoulder. "Me too, Jake. It's going to be a fresh start for all of us." The baby kicked, as if in agreement, and we both laughed. It was a sound of pure joy, a sign that despite everything, we were going to be okay. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, I realized that justice had been served, not just in the courtroom, but in our lives too. We had been tested, pushed to our limits, but in the end, we emerged stronger, united, and ready to face whatever the future held. Life had a funny way of unfolding in our small, suburban corner of the world. I, Nancy, navigated the steady ebb and flow of life as a bank teller, while my husband, Tom, managed the intricate dance of municipal politics. Our home was a testament to Tom's family, a house passed down through generations, now echoing with the remnants of our conversations and debates. It was a typical Thursday evening, and I was rummaging through the kitchen, prepping for dinner. The aroma of cooking filled the air, a small comfort in the otherwise silent house. "Tom, dinner's nearly ready," I called out, my voice bouncing off the walls. He strolled into the kitchen, his face buried in the day's mail. Smells good. What's the occasion?" His voice carried a hint of sarcasm, typical after a long day at the office. "Just trying to keep things interesting," I replied, setting the table. "You know, spice up our routine." Tom smirked, dropping the pile of envelopes on the counter. "Routine is good, Nancy. Keeps things predictable." That was Tom, always preferring the predictable, the controlled, and the comfortable. I often wondered what ran through his mind as he sifted through city issues, what dreams he chased within the confines of his calculated world. As we sat down to eat, the conversation drifted to mundane things, the leaky faucet, the Jones' new car, and the upcoming city council meeting. It was all so painfully normal until the mention of my family. "So, your nephew's coming this weekend?" Tom asked, his fork pausing midair. "Yeah, they are. Bobby's got a soccer game nearby. Thought they'd crash here afterward," I replied, trying to gauge his reaction. Tom's face hardened slightly. "Great, more chaos. Just what we need." "Oh, come on, Tom. They're just kids. Plus, it's nice having family around, don't you think?" I chided, hoping to lighten his mood. "Family's fine in small doses. But your brother's kids, they run around like wild animals. And that farm smell seems to follow them here." His words stung, an all too frequent reminder of the life I left behind and the world he never understood or cared to. "They're just excited, Tom. And they're my family." "They're part of me," I said firmly, my patience waning. Tom sighed, putting down his fork. I know. But can't they just tone it down a bit?" I shook my head, frustration simmering beneath the surface. "They're kids, Tom. They don't tone it down. That's what kids do. They play, they laugh, they make noise." The rest of the meal passed in a tense silence, the clinking of cutlery against plates filling the void between us. It was in these moments that I felt the distance growing, the gap widening between his world and mine. The morning buzzed with the usual flurry of activity, the kind that fills every working household. I was gulping down my coffee, already running through the day's tasks in my head, when my phone rang. It was an unusual time for a call, and seeing my brother's name flash on the screen sent a ripple of worry through me. "Hey, Jake, what's up?" I answered, trying to keep my voice even. "Nancy, it's Dad. He's sick, real sick." Jake's voice was strained, each word heavy with concern. I felt the air leave the room, my hand tightening around the phone. "What do you mean sick? What's happened?" "He's got cancer, Nancy. It's bad. The doctors are talking all sorts of treatments, but it's gonna cost a fortune." Jake's voice broke, the reality of our situation setting in. My mind raced, thoughts of Dad, the farm, and those childhood days flooding back. Okay. Let's figure this out. How much are we talking about? I can help." I could hear the hesitation in Jake's voice. "It's a lot, Nancy. More than any of us got. They're talking about treatments, chemo, maybe more. It's all just, a lot." My heart ached, an overwhelming urge to fix it all taking hold. "I'll talk to Tom. We can use some savings, maybe get a loan. We'll find a way." With a heavy heart, I hung up and turned to find Tom standing in the doorway, a questioning look on his face. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice laced with a casual concern. I took a deep breath, the weight of the news anchoring me to the spot. "It's my dad. He's sick, really sick. Cancer. It's bad, Tom." Tom's expression shifted, the news landing with a thud. "Jesus, Nancy. I'm sorry. What do you need?" "We need money for treatment. A lot of it." "I want to help, Tom. I need to help," I said, the words tumbling out, a mix of desperation and determination. Tom ran a hand through his hair, the gears turning. "Money, huh? That's gonna be tight. But, okay, we'll look at our finances, see what we can do." I nodded, the first wave of relief washing over me. "Thank you. I knew I could count on you." The rest of the morning was a blur, calls to the hospital, more conversations with Jake, and a deep dive into our savings account. The numbers swirled before me, daunting yet necessary. This was family, and nothing was too big or too hard when it came to family. The day Dad arrived at our place was one I'd been dreading and longing for in equal measure. Tom had been oddly agreeable about Dad staying with us, which should have been my first clue that something was off. As soon as Dad's car pulled into the driveway, I rushed out, my heart aching at the sight of him. He was a shell of the robust man I remembered, his frame hunched, his face drawn with pain and weariness. "Nancy, my girl," he said, his voice weak but filled with warmth as I helped him inside. Tom came out to greet us, his smile a little too stiff, a little too forced. "Welcome, Mr. Williams. Let me show you to your room." The evening passed in a sort of anxious dance, Dad trying to appear stronger than he was, Tom playing the gracious host, and me, caught in the middle, worrying about everything unsaid. As we sat down to dinner, a heavy silence enveloped the table. Tom was the first to break it, his voice cutting through the stillness like a knife. "So, Mr. Williams, I've been thinking about your situation. I want to help, really I do." Dad nodded, a wary look in his eyes. "That's kind of you, Tom. I appreciate all the support. But," Tom continued, "I think it's only fair we discuss some terms." "Terms?" My stomach twisted at the word, a sense of dread creeping up my spine. "What do you mean, Tom?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Tom looked between Dad and me, his gaze calculating. "Well, it's simple really. I'll cover the medical expenses, allow you to stay here, but in return, I want the farm. All of it, transferred to me and Nancy." I stared at him, disbelief and anger churning inside me. "Are you serious right now? You can't be serious." Dad's expression hardened, his tired eyes suddenly alight with a spark of the old fire. "You want my land, my home, in exchange for helping me? It's a fair deal, don't you think?" Tom said, leaning back in his chair. A small price to pay for your health and comfort. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was my husband, the man I'd vowed to spend my life with, and he was bargaining over my father's life like it was a business transaction. Tom, you can't do this. It's not right. It's disgusting, I spat out, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Dad pushed his chair back, his body trembling with a mix of rage and effort. I don't want your money, Tom. Not like this. I'd rather die than give you everything I've worked for. The room spun around me, the walls closing in. This was a nightmare, a terrible, heartless game, and Tom was revealing himself to be the villain. Fine, Tom said, his voice cold. Then you leave. Both of you. I won't be taken for a fool. With that, Dad grabbed his cane, his pride the only thing keeping him upright. I followed, my mind a whirlwind of hurt, anger, and disbelief. Tom, I can't believe you. I won't let you do this to my family, I said, my voice trembling. But he didn't respond, his face set in a mask of indifference. We packed a few things, Dad's weak protests echoing in my ears. This was it. The facade had crumbled, and the man I thought I knew had vanished, replaced by a stranger with cold eyes and a colder heart. We didn't speak much on the drive to the small rental I'd managed to find on short notice. It wasn't much, but it was a roof over our heads, a place to regroup and figure out our next steps. Once inside, I helped Dad to the couch, his body sinking into the cushions with a weary sigh. Nancy, I'm sorry. I never should have put you in this position, he murmured, his eyes downcast. No, Dad. Don't you dare apologize. This is on Tom, not you. I can't believe he'd do something like this, I replied, my voice fierce with anger. Dad shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping him. And to think I almost considered it, for a moment, to make sure you'd be taken care of. That's exactly why I'm doing all this, Dad. You took care of me my whole life. It's my turn now, I said, squeezing his hand. The following days were a blur of doctor's appointments, phone calls, and late-night internet searches for any financial aid we might qualify for. I was running on adrenaline and coffee, determined to find a way to afford Dad's treatment. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, I came back to the rental to find Dad sitting at the small kitchen table, a stack of bills in front of him. Nancy, sit down. We need to talk about this. Realistically, he said, his voice steady but tired. I pulled up a chair, my stomach in knots. What is it, Dad? He pushed the bills toward me, his finger tapping on the total amount due. This is more than you can handle, Nancy. I can't let you ruin your life for me. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. Dad, I'm not having this conversation. I'll find a way. We'll find a way. Together. Dad reached across the table, his rough hand covering mine. Nancy, listen to me. I've lived a good life. I've seen you grow into a remarkable woman. If it's my time, then so be it. But you have so much more to live for. Don't let this destroy you. I shook my head, pulling my hand away. No. I refuse to accept that. We're going to fight this, Dad. Until the very end. The determination in my voice seemed to give Dad a small spark of hope, or perhaps he just didn't have the heart to argue any further. We spent the rest of the evening in a quiet, mutual understanding, both of us too stubborn and too scared to consider giving up. Days turned into weeks, and despite the ever-present shadow of illness and financial strain, we found small moments of joy, old stories retold, laughter shared over simple meals, and quiet evenings watching whatever was on TV. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and for the moment, it was enough. 3 months had flown by in a blur of hospital visits, a relentless battle against the merciless tide of illness. Despite our best efforts and boundless hope, my father's condition deteriorated under the weight of the aggressive cancer. It was a losing fight, but one we endured together, with the stubbornness and heart that characterized our simple, hardworking family. My father's passing was quiet, a gentle surrender in the early hours of a gray morning. The pain of losing him was sharp, a raw wound that seemed to echo through the empty spaces of our rented home. The funeral was a somber affair, filled with hushed voices and tear-stained faces, a final goodbye to a man who had been the bedrock of our family. After the guests had left, the condolences spoken, and the last of the dishes put away, I sat with my brother, Jake, on the porch of our family home. The air was heavy with unspoken words, a shared grief hanging between us. "Emma, he was so proud of you. We both are. You did everything you could." I nodded, the weight of grief a tangible thing on my shoulders. "I just wish it could have been different." Jake hugged me, and we stood there, in the fading light, saying goodbye to our father, to a part of our lives that we'd never get back. The days after the funeral were heavy and quiet, filled with the kind of emptiness that follows a storm. I spent long hours staring at our land, stretching out with rows of corn and the old oak tree standing tall against the skyline. It was more than just soil and crops, it was Dad's legacy, a testament to his life's work. Jake and I had been going through Dad's papers, trying to sort out his affairs, when I stumbled upon a series of letters and notes. They were inquiries and offers on the land, some dated back a few months, others more recent. Each one hinted at the value of the land, suggesting it was set to skyrocket with the city's expansion plans. "Jake, look at this," I called out, my hand trembling slightly as I held out the papers. He came over, his eyes scanning the documents quickly. "What the hell? These offers are huge, Nancy. And they're all pretty recent." I nodded, the pieces of the puzzle starting to click into place. "It makes sense now. This is why Tom was so eager to get his hands on the land. He knew about this, somehow. He knew and tried to use Dad's illness to pressure us into signing it over." Jake's face darkened, a mix of anger and disbelief etched into his features. "That snake. Using our own dad's sickness for his gain. We've got to do something about this, Nancy." I agreed, the fire of determination igniting within me. "We will. We'll make sure this land stays in the family, just like Dad wanted. And as for Tom, he's going to regret ever trying to cheat us." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. We met with lawyers, talked to the city planners, and started to piece together a plan. The land was indeed about to become very valuable, and we were determined to protect it, to ensure it benefited the family and honored Dad's memory. But as we dug deeper, the reality of the situation became clear. We were up against more than just greedy land speculators, we were dealing with a network of information and influence, and at the center of it all was Tom. One evening, as Jake and I sat exhausted from another day of meetings and calls, the phone rang. It was Tom, his voice smooth and eerily calm. "Nancy, we need to talk. I've been hearing things about the land. I think we can come to an agreement, something beneficial for both of us." I felt a surge of disgust listening to him, the man I had once loved, now nothing more than a conniving stranger. "There's nothing to talk about, Tom. You tried to cheat my family, to take advantage of my father's death. You're not getting a single inch of that land," I replied, my voice steely and resolute. Tom let out a dry laugh. "Nancy, don't be naive. This is business. I was just trying to secure our future, our wealth. Let's meet, discuss this like adults." I clenched the phone tighter, the anger boiling inside me. "The only business I'll be discussing with you is the divorce. You'll be hearing from my lawyer, Tom. Goodbye." The days following my final conversation with Tom were fraught with a tense anticipation. Jake and I had enlisted a sharp-witted lawyer, Mr. Henderson, who specialized in estate and property law. He was a no-nonsense type, with a keen eye for detail and a deep understanding of the underhanded tactics used by those looking to exploit others. We sat in Mr. Henderson's office, the walls lined with legal tomes and certificates, as he laid out the strategy. "Now, Nancy and Jake, I've seen this type of thing before. Wealthy individuals trying to cash in on insider information. It's illegal and immoral. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win." I nodded, my resolve hardening. What do we need to do? I want to make sure Tom pays for what he tried to do. Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses, his eyes sharp. First, we gather all the evidence. The offers on the land, the communications from Tom, anything that can show his intent and knowledge of the land's value. Jake leaned forward, his brow furrowed. We've got plenty of that. Emails, letters, even some voicemails he left Nancy. Good, Mr. Henderson replied, that's a start. Next, we file for an injunction to prevent any sale or transfer of the land until this is resolved. That will protect your asset. The next few weeks were a blur of legal motions, affidavits, and tense waiting. Tom, it seemed, was not going down without a fight. His own lawyers were pushing back, painting him as an innocent party, just trying to take care of his sick father-in-law. But we had the truth on our side, and slowly, the evidence began to pile up against him. The turning point came when one of Tom's associates, caught up in another investigation, decided to turn state's evidence, providing a direct link between Tom and the speculators looking to buy the land. The day we received the news, Jake and I met at the local diner, a spot we'd come to frequent for its strong coffee and quiet corners. Nancy, this is it. This guy's testimony is going to nail Tom. He's not getting out of this, Jake said, a hint of triumph in his voice. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness a match for my mood. Good. He deserves everything that's coming to him. I just wish it hadn't come to this, you know? Jake reached across the table, his hand covering mine. I know, sis. But you're doing the right thing. Protecting the land, our family. It's what Dad would have wanted. The trial was a spectacle, the media latching onto the story of a local official caught in a web of greed and deceit. Tom's face was plastered on every news outlet, the details of his scheming laid bare for all to see. And when the verdict came down, guilty on all counts, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that justice had been served, but sadness for the man I had once loved, now just a shadow of his former self. The courthouse steps were behind us, the weight of months of legal battles lifted. I took a deep breath, the air tasting fresher, sweeter somehow. Jake and I walked in silence, each lost in thought, until we reached the old diner that had become our haven. Sliding into the booth, the familiar clatter of dishes and murmur of conversation wrapped around us like a comforting blanket. Jake ordered us coffee, and we sat, the steam curling up between us. You know, Nancy, I think this is the first time I've seen you look relaxed in months, Jake said, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I laughed, a genuine, light sound that felt foreign after all this time. Yeah, it's over, isn't it? I can finally move on, start fresh. He nodded, his eyes warm. You've got a whole new life ahead of you, sis. What's the plan? I stirred my coffee, the spoon clinking against the mug. Well, I've been thinking. I want to do something with the land. Not sell it off or anything, but maybe start a community garden, or a space for kids to learn about farming. Something that would make Dad proud. Jake's eyes lit up, enthusiasm radiating from him. That's a fantastic idea, Nancy. You always had a knack for dreaming big. I'm in, whatever you need. We spent the next hour talking excitedly about the possibilities, the dream taking shape between us. It felt good, right, to be planning for the future instead of reeling from the past. As we left the diner, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and pink, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The fight was over, but the journey was just beginning. I made my way to the small apartment I'd called home since leaving Tom. It was modest, but it was mine, a sanctuary from the world outside. Opening the door, I stepped inside, the quiet enveloping me. I wandered over to the window, the view stretching out to the city skyline in the distance. The land, our land, lay between here and there, a green expanse filled with potential and promise. The phone rang, startling me from my reverie. I picked it up, a familiar voice on the other end. Hey, Emma, it's Lucy, from the bank. I heard about everything, and I just wanted to say, if you need anything, we're all here for you. I smiled, touched by the offer. Thanks, Lucy. I appreciate it. Actually, there might be something. I'm thinking of starting a project on the land, something community-focused. Maybe the bank could be a part of it? Lucy's excitement was palpable, even through the phone. Absolutely, Emma. That sounds amazing. Let's set up a meeting, talk about what you need. We'd love to be involved. Hanging up, I felt a surge of excitement. The project was more than just a dream now, it was a possibility, a real, tangible future. I sat down, a small notebook and pen in hand, and began to jot down ideas, plans, names. The page filled up quickly, a testament to the flurry of thoughts and hopes swirling through my mind. It was a new beginning, not just for me, but for the community, for the legacy of the land. And as I wrote, I could almost feel Dad's presence, his quiet strength and unwavering support guiding me forward. The path ahead was uncharted, filled with challenges and opportunities, but I was ready. Ready to build, to grow, and to thrive. This was more than just a new chapter, it was a whole new book, and I was the author, pen in hand, ready to write a story of hope, perseverance, and renewal. The end was just the beginning. In our cozy little home, life often felt like a well-orchestrated symphony, each day flowing into the next with a comforting regularity. I'm Eliza, a dedicated dentist whose life revolves around caring for others, both in my clinic and at home. My husband, Tom, a man whose past life had etched lines of worry and contemplation on his face, was often my partner in quiet evenings spent discussing everything and nothing. This particular evening, however, held a different tune. As I entered our home, the aroma of simmering stew greeted me, a sign of Tom's attempt to provide some culinary comfort. I found him in the kitchen, looking more troubled than usual. "Hey love, what's cooking?" I asked, trying to inject some lightness into the heavy air. Tom glanced up, managing a weak smile. "Just some stew." "Eliza, we need to talk about something important." "It's about Alex." Alex, Tom's son from his previous marriage, lived with his mother in a different city. Our interactions were limited to brief, somewhat formal exchanges on Skype, his shy demeanor never allowing me to know him beyond the basic pleasantries. "What about Alex? Is he okay?" I queried, concern lacing my voice as I took a seat at the kitchen table. Tom joined me, his hands clasped together, the weight of his words gathering like storm clouds. "He's fine, health-wise. But he's been given a chance to follow his dream of forming a band. He's really passionate about it, Eliza. But, well, he needs our financial help." I leaned in, listening intently. "How much does he need?" I asked, my mind already sifting through our finances. Tom hesitated, then uttered, "Around $10,000. It's for the equipment, some studio time, things like that." I took a deep breath, the number settling in my mind. "That's a significant amount, Tom. But if it's for his dream, tell me, have you seen any of his work? Is he serious about this path?" He nodded vigorously. "I've heard some of his music during our calls. He spends every spare moment he has on it. I believe in him, Eliza." I watched the earnest look in his eyes, a father's love mingling with hope. "All right, Tom. If you believe this is right, I trust your judgment. Let's support Alex. But, let's also ensure it's a wise decision. We should probably have a chat with him, understand his plan a little better." Tom's face lit up with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Eliza. This means the world to him, and to me. And yes, let's arrange a call with him soon." As we sat there planning our next steps, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and apprehension. I was about to invest in a dream, in a young man I barely knew, hoping that our contribution would set him on a path to success and fulfillment. It was a risk, but perhaps, in the grand scheme of things, a risk worth taking for family. Months slipped by after the first financial aid for Tom's son, Alex. Life resumed its usual pace with my dental practice bustling and Tom's work steady. Then one evening, as autumn leaves began to paint the ground in hues of amber and gold, Tom approached me with a familiar hesitancy in his eyes. "Eliza, can we talk about something?" he asked, his voice carrying an edge of discomfort. I nodded, setting aside the book I was reading. "Of course, what's on your mind?" He took a deep breath, his gaze avoiding mine. "It's about Alex again. He's making great progress with his music, really diving into it. But he needs more support, another $10,000. I felt a twinge of surprise, my eyebrows knitting together in concern. Another $10,000? But we just provided for his initial setup. What does he need this time? Tom's fingers fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. He's looking to upgrade some equipment, maybe get into a better studio. It's just that, things are getting more serious for him now. I sighed, a sense of unease settling in. Tom, I understand wanting to support Alex, but we need to be mindful. We're talking about a lot of money here. I earn well, but these are hard-earned savings. We need to think about our future too. Tom's face turned a shade darker, his voice raising slightly. But it's for Alex, Eliza. My son. Don't you think he deserves this chance? His tone stung, a hint of accusation lingering in the air. Of course, I do, I replied, my voice firm yet calm. But I also believe in responsible support. We can't just keep handing out money without understanding the full picture. The conversation grew heated, our words a volley of concern and frustration. Then, suddenly, Tom's demeanor shifted from defensive to outright angry. You just don't understand, Eliza. You're not a parent. You don't know what it's like to want to give everything to your child. His words cut deep, echoing around the room. I recoiled, hurt flashing in my eyes. Tom, that's unfair. I've been nothing but supportive. But we can't be reckless. And your son is almost an adult, he needs to learn financial responsibility too. Tom shook his head, his anger boiling over. You're just being selfish and greedy, Eliza. You don't understand what family means. With that, he stormed out of the house, leaving me in a stunned silence. His accusations felt like a slap, the word greedy reverberating in my mind. I sat there, trying to piece together the fragments of our conversation, the harmony of our life now disturbed by a growing discord. Days turned into a week, and Tom's absence stretched on. I was left to ponder the situation alone, my concern for Alex's future wrestling with my dismay at Tom's reaction. When Tom finally returned, his demeanor had softened, but the underlying issue remained unresolved. I'm sorry, Eliza, he said, his voice low. I shouldn't have exploded like that. It's just, I want to do right by Alex. I nodded, accepting his apology but feeling the distance between us. I understand, Tom. But we need to be a team in this, especially when it comes to big decisions. Reluctantly, I agreed to the additional support for Alex, my heart heavy with apprehension. Tom's immediate switch back to his affectionate self was a relief, but also a reminder of the fragile balance we were treading. The cycle of financial requests for Tom's son had become a recurring theme, straining not just our bank account, but also the very fabric of our relationship. Just as the leaves began to shift to the fiery colors of fall, Tom approached me again, his demeanor more desperate than before. Eliza, we need to talk about Alex again, he began, avoiding my gaze. I set down my book, a sense of dread filling the air. What is it this time, Tom? He fidgeted, clearly uncomfortable. It's a big opportunity for him, a chance to go on a tour with his band. He needs our help, Eliza. He needs $30,000. I was taken aback, the figure echoing in my mind like a bad joke. 30,000? Tom, this is getting out of hand. We've been supportive, but this is too much. Tom's face flushed with frustration. But it's for his future, Eliza. Can't you see? He could make it big. I stood up, feeling the tension like a physical force between us. And I want to support him, but not blindly. We've never even seen him play. We don't know if this band is real or just a whim. We need some kind of proof, Tom. His voice raised, a note of panic creeping in. Why can't you just trust me, Eliza? Why do you need proof for everything? I replied, my own voice rising in response. Because trust is based on honesty and responsibility, Tom. And right now, I'm not seeing a lot of either. The room was thick with unsaid words and mounting frustrations. Tom then dropped a bombshell that shattered any semblance of normalcy. If you don't give this money for Alex, I don't think I can stay in this marriage. I felt as if the floor had fallen out beneath me. Are you blackmailing me, Tom? Using our marriage as a bargaining chip for money? He didn't answer, his silence speaking volumes. I realized then that our issues ran deeper than I had ever imagined. This was about more than money, it was about respect, trust, and the balance of power in our relationship. I need time to think, I said finally, my voice hollow. This isn't something I can decide right now. Tom stormed out, leaving me alone with my swirling thoughts. I knew something had to change. We couldn't continue down this path of ultimatums and financial demands. That night, as I lay in bed, the space beside me cold and empty, I realized that I was at a crossroads. One path led to giving in to Tom's demands, sacrificing my principles and possibly my financial security. The other was fraught with the unknown, potentially leading to the end of my marriage. In the quiet of our home, I sat down with my laptop, a sense of unease stirring within me as I navigated to Alex's Instagram page. The images that greeted me were far from what I expected of a struggling musician. Lavish parties, designer clothes, exotic locations, it all painted a picture of luxury that belied the story we'd been told. I needed answers directly from Alex. I called him on Skype, ensuring the video recording was on, ready to confront him about the inconsistencies. He answered, his face a mask of casual indifference. Alex, we need to talk about the money your dad and I have been sending you. I began, my tone firm. He shrugged nonchalantly. What about it? I didn't mince words. I've seen your Instagram. Your lifestyle doesn't match up with needing money for a band. I'm not sending any more money. His face changed then, the cool facade slipping into something darker. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I have connections, people that can make life very unpleasant for you. I felt a chill at his threat, but I didn't waver. Alex, I've been recording this conversation. Threatening me is a serious offense. I can take this to the police. The bravado drained from his face, leaving behind a pale, frightened boy. Tears welled up in his eyes as he realized the gravity of his actions. Please, no. I was just talking big. I'm not in any gang. I don't want any trouble with the police. His sudden shift from intimidation to desperation made me pause. He was on the verge of revealing something more, something that might explain the bizarre turn of events. Sitting back, I watched Alex's face, tear-streaked and pale, as he prepared to spill the secrets he'd been holding on to. All right, Alex, let's hear it then. What's going on? Through sobs, Alex began to unravel the web of lies. It started off small, just me wanting some extra cash. But then I found something about Dad. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. What did you find about your dad, Alex? He wiped his eyes, taking a shaky breath. I found out he was seeing someone, not just anyone, someone from his past. I took pictures, threatened to tell you unless he kept sending money. My world spun with his confession. Tom has been unfaithful? And you've been blackmailing him? Alex nodded miserably. Yes. I never meant for it to get this far. I wanted to live a certain way, and when I found out about Dad, it seemed like an easy way to keep the money coming. I felt a mix of anger and pity. Alex, Do you realize how serious this is? Blackmail is a crime. And your father, how could he? He sniffled, looking down. I know it's messed up. I don't know, I got in too deep. But I swear, Eliza, I don't want to cause any more trouble. I'll stop. I'll figure something else out. I sighed, the weight of the situation heavy on my shoulders. And the band, the tours, all of that was just a lie? He nodded again. Yeah. I'm sorry. I like music, sure, but there was no band. I just needed a story for the money. I sat back, processing everything. My husband had been unfaithful, my stepson a blackmailer. The foundation of my family was cracked and broken. Alex, I need to talk to your father about this. And you need to sort yourself out. This isn't the way to go through life. He nodded, a small glimmer of understanding in his eyes. I know. I'm sorry, Eliza. Really. As the call ended, I was left in a silent house, the echo of Alex's confessions ringing in my ears. The lies were unraveling, revealing a painful truth I could no longer ignore. I knew the next step was confronting Tom, but a part of me dreaded what that confrontation would bring. The man I had built a life with was a stranger, and our marriage a facade. I needed to gather my strength, for the conversation ahead would be the most challenging of my life. The house felt unbearably quiet as I waited for Tom to return. The ticking of the clock seemed to echo my racing heart, each minute stretching longer than the last. When I finally heard the turn of the key in the lock, my stomach knotted with anxiety. Tom entered, immediately sensing the storm brewing in the air. Eliza, what's wrong? You look like you're about to explode. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Tom, we need to talk. Now. He hesitated, then nodded, taking a seat across from me. What's it about? I didn't beat around the bush. It's about Alex, Tom. And it's about you. I know everything, the blackmail, the affair. Alex confessed. Tom's face paled, his eyes widening in shock. What? Eliza, I can explain. I felt a surge of anger. Explain? How can you possibly explain lying to me, allowing your son to blackmail you, and using our money to cover up your affair? He looked down, shame etched across his face. I was afraid, Eliza. Afraid of losing you. I thought I could control the situation, but it spiraled out of control. I shook my head, my voice rising. Control? You call this control? You've been living a double life, Tom. And all the while, lying to my face. Tom's voice broke. I'm sorry, Eliza. I never meant for any of this to happen. I didn't know how to handle it. I stood up, my hands trembling with a mixture of fury and heartbreak. Sorry doesn't cut it, Tom. Your son was threatening me, using gang connections to intimidate me because of your mistakes. Tom stood as well, reaching out to me. Please, Eliza, let's try to work this out. I'll do anything. I pushed his hand away. Work this out? How can I possibly trust you again? How can we go back to how things were knowing what I know now? He had no answer, just stood there, a man broken by his own deceit. I knew then that our marriage was beyond repair. The trust that once bound us together had been shattered by lies and blackmail. Tom, I need you to leave, I said, my voice cold and final. He didn't argue, just nodded silently and walked out, the door closing with a soft click that seemed to echo the closing chapter of our life together. As I sat back down, alone in the echoing silence of our home, I felt a profound sense of loss and betrayal. But amidst the pain, there was also a flicker of relief. The truth was out, painful as it was, and now I could begin to heal, to rebuild my life on a foundation of honesty and self-respect. In the aftermath of our confrontation, the house felt empty, the silence a constant reminder of the betrayal and deceit that had unfolded. I knew I couldn't just let things end there. There needed to be consequences for the lies and the financial manipulation. It was time for a legal reckoning. I found myself sitting across from a lawyer, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. "Mrs. Johnson, I've gone through all the information you provided," he began, his tone professional yet sympathetic. "I need to pursue legal action," I stated firmly. "Not just for the divorce, but for the recovery of the money Tom used for his blackmail payments, and for the emotional distress this has caused me." The lawyer nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "We can certainly file for divorce on grounds of infidelity and emotional distress. As for the money, we'll need all the evidence you have of the transactions and any communication between you and your husband or stepson regarding this matter." I assured him I had kept meticulous records. I trusted Tom completely. "Never thought I'd need these as evidence against him," I admitted, a sad irony in my voice. He offered a small, reassuring smile. "You're doing the right thing by protecting yourself and your assets. This won't be easy, but I'll be with you every step of the way." The following weeks were a blur of legal documents, meetings, and court appearances. Tom looked defeated each time our paths crossed, the reality of his actions finally hitting home. At one such encounter, he approached me, his expression one of regret. "Eliza, I never wanted it to come to this. I'm sorry." I looked at him, the man I once loved, now a stranger. "Sorry isn't enough, Tom. You made your choices, and now we're both living with the consequences." The final court session was the hardest. I sat there, listening as my lawyer laid out the case, detailing the emotional and financial toll of Tom's deceit. When the judge finally spoke, granting me the divorce along with compensation for the misused funds and emotional suffering, I felt a bittersweet relief. As I walked out of the courtroom, the weight of the past months felt both heavier and lighter. I had stood up for myself, faced the legal battle, and emerged with a sense of closure, albeit a painful one. But the journey wasn't over. There were still pieces of my life to pick up, a future to rebuild. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but as I stepped out into the sunlight, I felt a glimmer of hope. I decided to visit my old friend and confidant, Martha, who had been a pillar of support through my ordeal. As I entered her cozy living room, she greeted me with a warm, knowing smile. "Eliza, look at you. How are you holding up?" she asked, ushering me to sit. I sighed, a small smile playing on my lips. "I'm okay, Martha. It's been tough, but I feel like I'm finally seeing the light at the end of this long, dark tunnel." Martha patted my hand gently. "You've been through so much, my dear. But you handled it with such grace and strength. I'm proud of you." I nodded, feeling a sense of pride myself. "It was hard, Martha, facing Tom in court, unraveling all the lies. But I stood up for myself. And now, it's time for a new beginning." Martha's eyes twinkled with encouragement. "So, what's next for Eliza Johnson?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the question. "First, I think I need some time to heal, to rediscover who I am outside of this whole mess. Then, I want to focus on my work, maybe even take a vacation, something I haven't done in years." "Sounds like a plan," Martha replied warmly. "And remember, Eliza, this is your chance to rewrite your story, on your own terms." Her words resonated within me. Yes, I had been through a storm, but now I had the opportunity to chart my own course. In the following weeks, I immersed myself in work and self-care. I took up yoga, started reading more, and even planned a solo trip to a place I'd always wanted to visit. Life without Tom was different, but it was mine to shape. One evening, as I was preparing for my trip, the doorbell rang. It was Alex. He stood there, looking nervous and remorseful. "Eliza, I just wanted to say I'm sorry, face to face. For everything," he stammered. I regarded him, seeing not the aggressive young man from our Skype call, but a remorseful, lost boy. "Thank you, Alex. I hope you've learned from this, and that you're making changes for the better. He nodded earnestly. I am. And I owe it to you for standing up to me. You helped me see how wrong I was. I smiled slightly, acknowledging his apology. Take care of yourself, Alex. And make good choices, okay? As he walked away, I closed the door and turned back to my own path, feeling a sense of closure. The journey had been arduous, but I emerged stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever lay ahead. The sun set in a blaze of glory, its vibrant hues a promise of the new chapter awaiting me. A chapter of healing, growth, and self-discovery. A new horizon was before me, and I stepped forward with determination and hope, ready to embrace whatever the future held.